Good morning, grade 12 learners. Today we're going to look at exam prep for paper 2 accounting. I'm Mrs. Andrews with the Moteo district, right? So it's important for me that you do well in paper 2. Paper 2 is where we have all our shorter topics like our reconciliations, our inventory, our manufacturing and our budgets. So most likely the way I see it, in our prelim we had 4 questions, so I think we're going to have 4 questions again covering all these topics. And this morning in particular I want to look at manufacturing only. Earlier today we did look at budgets, reconciliation and VAT, right? So now I want us to focus on manufacturing. So put that manufacturing in your head so you can think only manufacturing now. Manufacturing businesses is businesses that's producing goods in a business, right? So this mainly takes place in a factory. So when you do the production costs, you want to focus on the factory. There's also the administrative cost and there's the selling and distribution cost. But the cost that's important for us in the manufacturing is that factory cost, right? Like when you do factory overheads, you only worry about the factory. What's also important for me, by now I don't think we struggle so much with the time issue anymore. But in the past we used to say, read your information, and I think that is still applicable. Read your information and then you put it on your answer sheet. You have an answer sheet with all the questions 3.1.1, 3.1.2. So you can answer any question at any point in time that you want. That also goes for the overall answering of your question paper. You don't have to answer 1, 2, 3, 4. If number 4 budgets is the best for you, you start with budgets. If number 2 says inventory and inventory is the best for you, you start with inventory. I also want to remind you again, remember I've not seen the paper, so I don't know what exactly is in the paper. But our accounting, we know exactly which topics will be asked. And when you work through many past papers, you start seeing a pattern of the way they're going to ask the questions as well, right? So it's not that unpredictable for us. Yes, the figures is not the same figures that we've ever seen. It will be different figures, right? The wording might be little bit different, but it's still the same production cost statement. It's still the same calculation of raw materials. It's still the same factory overhead note that you have to do, right? So learn your basic formats and you will be okay. Read your questions carefully, right? So what I want to do, I call it the cash and carry method. So you read your information and then you put it on your question paper. Maybe in the beginning that might sound a little bit deurmekaar for you or messed up for you. But as time goes on, you get used to it because every amount of figure that you put on your question paper, most likely you're getting a mark for that. So as you read your information, I want to put it down. I'm going to look at question number 3 in paper 2 of the Free State paper that we wrote in September, right? So let's look at the question first. Question number 3, manufacturing. It was for 40 marks, 35 minutes. Also manage your time well. Don't get into a situation, if it says 35 minutes, only use your 35 minutes. Don't get into a situation where you've only answered 3 questions in the 2 hours and then your time is up. And then it's most likely a question that you might know well. So also when you answer, start with a question that you know best. Like I said earlier, if inventory is your best question, start with inventory. If you enjoy manufacturing, start with manufacturing. Start wherever you feel comfortable. Then you try and save some time on that one. This manufacturing question was given to you for 35 minutes. Maybe you only need 20 minutes because manufacturing is a question that you like and enjoy. So you go fast through the question, right? Then you save a little bit of time to work. Let's say recons is not your question. Then you work a little bit more on recons. So manage your time well. Also try and save your time so that you can spend a little bit of time on things that you're struggling a little bit with, right? But study your formats and you will be okay for the exams. I know this was a very stressful year for us all. But really, we had more than enough time to cover all our syllabus. Our papers, even late, the lateness of the paper could be an advantage for you, or it could be a disadvantage. An advantage if you keep on working, especially now that your business studies is over, you carry on with the accounting, you give it your all, then it will be an advantage that it's so late. A disadvantage if by now the time you're tired and you don't want to work anymore and you stop working and you stop practicing accounting, then you're going to end up in trouble. So please carry on working, don't give up now. We're almost at the end, right? Let's look at question number 3 on manufacturing from the Free State prelim paper. The business, let's read first and then we will highlight certain things. The business specializes in the production of security alarms. The financial year ends on the 30th of September 2019, right? You can highlight that 30 September. That's the end of the financial year for me, right? Calculate and complete the following on the 30th of September. Direct materials issued to the factory for the year. You can study the format there and know it. The production cost of finished goods for the year, know how to do this calculation or how to do this ledger account. Factory overhead cost note for the year. I said to you, when you do your factory overhead, all you worry about is the cost that's linked to your factory. So you only talk about factory. Okay. Complete the production cost statement for the year. A production cost statement is normally 7, 8, maybe I've once seen one with 16 marks a few years back. I think it was the 2015 paper. That was about the most marks it ever carried, or it was 22 marks, I'm not too sure right now. But the production cost statement is mainly made up of method marks. If you calculate the direct material cost, and you take that figure down to the production cost statement, we're going to look at that as well. Then you get a mark for it. We call those marks the method mark. But you can't do your direct material calculation, get let's say 600,000, but when you take it to production cost, it's now 700,000. Then you're not going to get the mark, right? The method mark. So you must take the same figure that you've calculated in 3.1.1 and take it down to the production cost statement. Know the format of the production cost statement, because like I said, it's mainly made out of method marks, and you can really get all 7 marks even if your production cost statement is not 100% correct, right? Okay, so that's what we have to do in this particular question. Let's look at my information in A. Now I want you to follow with me if you have your papers there with you. Information A. The following balances appeared in the stock accounts on the 30th of September 2019, and be careful when you look at your date. Look at this date. It says the 30th of September 2019. What date is this one? This is the date of the, let's highlight it quickly. This is the end of the financial year, right? So these are your closing figures, right? In 1 October 2018, this is the beginning of the accounting period. Sometimes they swap it around and they first give you the opening balances and then they give you the closing balances. And that's why I said to you earlier when we started reading the question, please highlight your end of year so that you know when is the beginning and when is the end. Normally with our opening balances, we say we add our opening balances, and with our closing, we say we subtract our closing balances, right? Because this forms not part of the cost for this particular year, because you have not used that particular item. Okay, let's look at raw material stock. Our opening for raw material is 54,700. Our closing is 69,700. I'm just going to go to my answer book quickly. This is your answer book, right? SOS manufacturers calculate and complete the following on 30 September. Now I've seen that my raw material opening stock and my closing stock is 69,700 and 54,700. I said to you, opening stock must be added and closing stock must be subtracted. So that's exactly what I'm going to write now. My 54,700, let me change my pen, 54,700, right? And then I'm going to minus, let's do it here, minus my 69,700. You notice I have not read all the information yet. But that was my first bit of information that I read, and I'm writing it down. Now I already have 2 marks there without too much of effort, right? Because I know opening balance must be added, closing balance must be subtracted. Let's go back to the question paper again. Okay, the next indirect material stock. That information must go to your factory overhead note, right? Now I'm going to take that information. I know opening balances must be added, closing balances must be subtracted. Where will you find indirect material stock? I find that on my factory overhead note. Let's go back to our answer book. Okay. Can you see what I was talking about? We are jumping up and down. I do not finish one thing first. I read my information and then I take my information to my answer book, thereby picking up marks as I go. What you guys do, you want to finish direct materials first. Now you must look for all the information related to direct materials. And write with a pencil if you have to. Maybe we write something down and later we find that thing must only be a portion going there. Write it down or write on the side and park your answer there. If you know it's linked to direct materials, park it there somewhere around direct materials, right? We say we park it, so you just put it down there. Let's say factory overhead note cost for the year. I'm looking for indirect materials. Indirect. Okay, I'm going to abbreviate. You don't use these abbreviations. You write them out in full. So 14,100 was my opening. Alright, I think I must rather use, let's see if I can work better with a pen. Minus the closing of 2730. Right? 2730. Okay, let's close it. Okay, I think I'm going to work with the pen, it will be better. Okay, let's go back to our question paper again. Once again, I've now read raw material stock. I've recorded my information. I've read indirect material stock. I've recorded my information, right? Now, work in progress stock. That opening balance, where do I need that? I need that on the production cost statement. But you can only know these things if you know your formats. I cannot stress how important it is. Let's take that 65,050 to my production cost statement, right? Production cost statement. Okay. Right. Help me with the format of the production cost statement for the year. What do I have first? Direct material. Then I have direct labor. Direct material plus direct labor gives me prime cost, right? Then I have my factory overheads. Factory overheads, right? Be careful of these abbreviations. Factory overheads, right? Prime cost plus factory overheads gives me total cost of production, right? Total cost of production. Then I'm going to have my work in progress at the start. So work in progress at the beginning is 65,050. Let's check quickly that amount. 65,050. Okay, there we go. Let's go back to the question paper. Okay, then I have finished goods stock. Earlier I saw in my questions that I'm going to do the production cost of finished goods. Do you see there's finished goods? Finished goods for the year. So that information I can also use in my finished goods. I can either do a calculation or I can do a ledger account. Go with the one that you find easier. I always find the ledger accounts easier for me. They will give you marks whether it's the calculation or the ledger account. Let's go for the ledger account, right? Okay, let's see again. Opening stock, and this is a stock account, right? So it falls under your assets. Assets increase on the debit side, decrease on the credit side. So your opening stock balance must be on your debit side and your closing balance will be on your credit side. Okay, let's do that quickly. Go to our answer sheet again. Okay, this is your finished goods. I said opening stock will be 100,450. 100,450. Let's write it here. Don't waste time trying to be fancy and fancy lines or the ruler and so on. Just try and get all your answers on your question paper or your answer book, right? Then we have the finished goods stock at the end of the year, 79,500. Okay, let's go back to our question paper. That's A. A's information. I read it and I recorded it all over the place, right? Thereby saving time. So I don't have to go back to A because I've read all my information in A. Let's go to B. Purchases of raw material during the year amounted to 1,135,000. Returned raw materials valued 4,700 has not been recorded. So I'm going to add, I'm just going to write in my pen again. Let's go to our question paper. We must now deal with that 1,135,000 and we must deal with the 4,700. The 1,135,000 is stock that we bought, so it must be added. The 4,700 is stock that we have returned and we've not recorded it, so we must subtract that stock now, right? Let's do that quickly. Okay, that goes up here. I'm just going to write again 54,700. Then we say plus 1,135,000, right? Minus 4,700 minus 69,700, right? Okay, back to my question paper. These invoices, C, we've dealt with B. We don't go back to B again. These invoices were omitted in connection with deliveries to SOS manufacturers and from SOS manufacturers, right? So it's invoices, so it must be added. So we can say plus 3,500. Why are we adding? Because remember, our transport cost adds to the value of our stock. You must remember your carriage, right? From SOS, that's not our expense, right? So we're not going to deal with that, right? That's carriage on sales, basically, that we don't deal with. Let's go to D. A trade discount of 3,800 on raw material had not been granted. SOS manufacturers was entitled to this discount. A discount means minus, so we were supposed to have subtracted that 3,800 because trade discounts we don't show in our records, right? So what must we do with that 3,800? We must subtract it, and it was for raw materials. So let's do exactly that. So it's minus 3,800. Okay, back to our question. E. The monthly insurance has remained constant for the last 2 years. Insurance paid for the year amounted to 121,520. And this includes insurance paid in advance for October and November 2019. Insurance for the current year to be allocated to the selling and distribution is 44,640 and 22,320 for the administration department, and the rest must go for the factory. Right, let's read again. Insurance then once again must go under your factory overheads. It's not a direct cost. Remember your direct material and your direct labor, these are your direct costs. Direct labor is the people who assemble the products. If we are making tables, then the direct labor would be the ones assembling the tables. Right, direct materials will then for the tables be the nails and the planks that we need to make the tables, or steel that we need to make the tables, right? Then we have our indirect costs. Our indirect costs will go under our factory overheads, and insurance is one of those costs that must go under our factory overheads, right? So let's read again. Monthly insurance has remained constant for the last 2 years. So it didn't change. That's what that sentence is saying. Insurance paid for the year amounted to 121,520, and this includes insurance paid in advance for October and November. So we only supposed to have 12 months, but now we have 14 months because our accounting period ends on September 2019, right? The 30th of September 2019. But now this insurance also includes for October and November. What does the matching concept say? The GAR principle says we must only take into account income and expenses incurred in this accounting period. So what must we do with October and November? We must calculate and subtract it, or we say 12 over 14 to just get the 12 months that we need, right? Then it says insurance for the current year to be allocated to the selling and distribution department is 44,640 and 22,320, right? So let's do that quickly on our answer book. So we are saying, let me get this here, insurance 121,520 divide by, or times 12 divide by 14. Why times 12? We only want for 12 months. Why divide by 14? Because the insurance was paid for 14 months, right? Remember, if you have an unknown figure, divide by what you have. In this case is 14 times what you want. What do we want? We want the 12 months, right? Then we're going to subtract the insurance on the selling and distribution. Remember, if you do the factory overheads, you only talk factory. Selling and distribution, administrative costs, not part of our calculation. So we must subtract those two amounts, right? If I add 44,640 plus 22,320, it will give me 66,960, right? So 66,960, and then I can close, and that will then be my answer, right? We'll do the answers now. Okay, let's read the next one. If indirect material bought during the year was 250,400. That's what we bought. Indirect material used is divided between the factory, administration, and selling and distribution department in the ratio of 1:1:3. Right, let's read again. Indirect material bought during the year was 250,400. I'm going to add that to my calculation. Remember, in my indirect material, I already have an opening and a closing. I need that purchases now, right? So I'm going to add the 250,400, and then I must take the ratio or the portion that belongs to the factory. In this case, they say to me, indirect material used is divided between the factory, administration, and selling and distribution department in the ratio of 1:1:3, which means factory gets 1, administration and gets 1, selling and distribution gets 3, right? The first thing that you do with the ratio, you add it. So 3 plus 1 plus 1 gives me 5. So factory will get 1/5. That's their portion of the indirect material. Let's do that. Okay. So indirect material, remember we have our opening that we must add, plus our purchases, 250,400 minus the closing stock, because the closing stock do not form part of the expense for this particular year. Then times 1/5, because that's the portion that's allocated to the factory. Okay, let's go back to our question paper. Sales for the year were 6,282,375. The business made use of 150% markup on cost price. If I see sales and I see a markup, then I know I can use this information to calculate my cost of sales. Where do I need this cost of sales? I need this cost of sales in the calculation of my finished goods, right? So let's use that information quickly. Let's go back to our answer book. Just turn my page. Sales for the year, I'm going to write mine down here. Sales is 6,282,375 times, I want the cost price 100/250. Remember, this 250 is your 100 plus your markup, right? Which in our case is 100 plus 150 to make up that 250, right? Do your calculation for me. Help me with this calculation. Your answer will then be 2,512,950. 2,512,950. This amount I needed here in my finished goods calculation. Remember your format here? Okay. So far so good. So can you see? Now I can balance this account, because the only amount is the cost, the production cost of the finished goods for the year. So you can add these two and subtract this one, and then you will get the answer for this one, right? So add your 79,500 plus your 2,512,950 minus your 100,450. Do the calculation. It will then give you 2,492,000. Okay, your totals. Okay, we don't have to do the totals. We are interested in this figure. This is then my final answer. 2,492,000. That is the production cost of finished goods for the year. Why does that look so familiar? Where can I use this figure? You write on the production cost statement. So let's take it there. Total cost of production of finished goods, 2,492,000. I know by now, if they give me the work in progress at the beginning, or they give me work in progress at the end, or they leave out one of these two, like in this question, they left out work in progress at the beginning, then I know somewhere in my question, I will get the total cost of production of finished goods. Either they will give it to me, or I have to calculate it. Now this is the missing figure. Now you can use this information to calculate this, right? So let's leave that for a moment there. Okay, let's go back to our question paper again. Can you see? No wasting of time, no up and down. I know it will take time, but practice it. Maybe it will work for you when you write next week. H. The rent for the selling and distribution department amounts to 171,500 for the current year. Rent is distributed between the departments, factory, administration, and selling and distribution as follows. 60% for the factory, 5% for the administration, and the balance for selling and distribution. If I say 60 plus 5, I get 65. Then I say 100 minus 65, it gives me 35. Which means this 171,500 is equal to 35%. What did I say? Divide by what you have times what you want. What do you want? You want the 60% of the factory. So take your 171,500 divided by 35, that's what you have, times what you want. We want 60%, right? Okay, let's do that. Okay, this is your rent. This is my rent. Then I say 171,500 times 60 divided by 35, right? And that will then give you the portion of the factory. Okay. Information number I. The following salary and wages expenses were incurred. Factory indirect labor, it's indirect labor, so it will go to administration. Administration clerks, that's not our problem. Direct labor, production, 790,000 including contributions. So they gave us direct labor. Where can we use that direct labor, you think? You're right, on the production cost statement. So let's go to our production cost statement, right? Let's find our production cost statement. Direct labor 790. It was then given to you. You didn't have to do anything with that amount, right? Okay. Administration clerks, we're not going to work with that information. And then factory indirect labor, the gross salary, the contributions must also then be added, right? Let's go to our answer book and then we do that. Indirect labor. Okay. This is labor. So we're going to take out 312,800 plus your 6,352 of the contribution. Remember, that's the contribution is also our expense. The gross wages plus the contribution is our expense. Plus 3,128. Okay. Right. That brings us to the end of this question. So now all that I have to do, I have to bring everything together, right? So I have to add up everything. Let's go to indirect materials issued to the factory. You add up take your 54,700 plus your 1,135,000 minus 4,700 minus your 69,700 minus your 3,800. Plus your 3,500, and it gives you can add, good, it gives me 1,115,000, right? I'm going to add, let's do it. Let's not add further. Let's go to our production cost statement. Then we add that 1,115,000, right? See, you take your figure from your direct material calculation or your note and you take it to the production cost statement. The same figure, not a different figure. If it's a different figure, you're not getting that mark, right? Okay. Finished goods, we're done with that, and we took this amount to our production cost statement. So we don't have to worry about this one. Help me with our calculations here. Indirect material 14,100 plus 250,400 minus 2,730. Your answer times 1/5. I'm just going to write my figures a little bit away. I hope you have a better handwriting than mine. Then it gives me 52,354. Right. Insurance 121,000 520 times 12 over 14 minus the 66,960. Add for me. Yes, you're right. Gives you 37,200. Okay, my rent, 171,500 times 60 divided by 35 gives me 294,000. Okay, indirect labor, my 312,800 plus 6,352 plus 3,128 gives me 322,280. You add the amount and it gives you 705,834. Okay, normally when they give you this factory overhead note, they will give you things like telephone. Telephone is part of the administrative cost. It must not be here. Or they can give you advertising. Advertising is part of selling and distribution. It mustn't be here. Here they give you administration clerks. Administration clerks is not our expense. It must not be here. Then you'll see there's some extra lines there to see if you will know that administration clerks must not be there. Telephone mustn't be there. Advertising mustn't be there. It's not part of our expense for the factory, right? Now we have 705,834. That amount I'm going to take to my production cost statement, right? There I have factory overhead, 705,834. Alright. Now I can move to finalizing my production cost statement. Look at my production cost statement. All my information I have is there. I'm going to take my direct material cost plus my direct labor, add the two, add for me on that side. My 0, 0, zeros and my 5 here and a 10 here and an 8 here. Okay, so it's 1905, right? 1905. Then I take my prime cost plus my factory overheads and I add for me on that side, gives me 2,610,834. Then I'm going to take my total cost of production. Sometimes they take total cost of production out and they say to you in the question paper, calculate total cost of production. Then you must know it's your direct material cost, your direct labor cost plus your factory overhead. Those three gives you total cost of production, right? Total cost of production plus your work in progress at the start, the 65,000, you add it and it gives me 2,675,884. Now the only missing amount, and that amount must be in brackets, is work in progress at the end, right? Remember, this one was not given to us. There was a question mark on the question paper, right? Work in progress at the end. So I'm going to say 2,675,000 minus 2,492,000 and it will give me 183,884. So how did I get this one? 2,675,884 minus 249,200. Okay. And that will give me 183,884. And if you then take this one there, or this one 2 million minus this one, then it must give you that answer of 2,492,000. And that is the end of that question, right? Let's take a 5-minute break before we carry on with the rest of the question. Welcome back again. Let's finish this question quickly. The next part, 3.2, deals with the break-even point. There's always, let me not say almost, always, let me say most of the time, there's a break-even point calculation. Now, what is a break-even point? The break-even point is the point where we've produced enough goods to cover our fixed cost in the business, right? Up to this good, let's say we need 20 goods. Up to this 20 goods. We are just covering our costs, our fixed costs mainly. So we are not making a profit, we are not making a loss. So the idea or the aim in the business is to make as many products, more than that 20, because from the 21st product you are making a profit, right? If you however make 19 or 18, then you are making a loss because you're not even covering your cost, right? So the break-even point is the point or the number of items we need to produce in order to cover our fixed cost mainly, right? Now we have a calculation or a formula that we use to calculate our break-even cost. The formula is fixed cost over total fixed cost over selling cost per selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, right? Then fixed cost, we have 5 costs in our business, right? We have administration cost, we have selling and distribution cost, we have our direct labor, our direct material cost, and our factory overhead cost, right? Now let's look at it. We have variable cost and we have fixed cost, right? Variable costs are costs that changes all the time depending on the number of units produced. A very good example and also a point of argument normally for us in class is water and electricity, because the more hours you work or the more units you produce, the higher your water and electricity, right? So you need water in your production process. So the more water you use, the more time you work, the more units you produce, the more your water will be, right? Now why do I say it's also a point of argument in class? Because we put water and electricity under our factory overheads, and yet we consider our factory overheads. But for the purposes of our curriculum, we define our factory overheads as fixed costs, right? Now what's a fixed cost? If you look at the rent income or the rent expense, the rent of the building is 5,000. Whether you work 20 hours, 500 hours for the month, the rent will still remain the same. So fixed cost remains the same irrespective of the number of units produced. Variable cost changes according to the number of units produced. Why is that important? Sometimes they give you the total fixed cost and they give you the variable cost, or sometimes they give you the 5 costs and then you have to identify the fixed cost and you have to identify the variable cost, right? Now I said we have direct labor, we have direct materials, right? These two are considered your variable costs, right? Then we have our selling and distribution. Obviously, the more items you distribute, the higher your cost will be, right? So selling and distribution, direct material costs and direct labor costs, these are your variable costs. Then we have our administration costs and our factory overheads. These two are considered your fixed cost, right? If ever it's not given. Remember, fixed cost over selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, right? Variable cost per unit, selling price per unit, sometimes given, sometimes you have to calculate. If you have to calculate the per unit or the unit cost, take the selling price divided by the number of items, right? Or take the variable cost divided by the number of items produced, right? Then you take your fixed cost over selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, depending how the question is given. Let's look at our question paper and see how our question was given to us. H2O manufacturers. H2O is a small manufacturing business that produces plastic water bottles owned by Wally. Calculate the break-even point for H2O on the 29th of February 2020 for 4 marks. Right, what do we need? Fixed cost, selling price per unit, variable cost per unit. Let's find it. Okay, here is my variable cost, and can you see there's a unit cost even given to you, right? That 11 Rand and 75 cents. So we didn't have to calculate. You see, you have your direct material cost, your direct labor cost, and your selling and distribution cost that makes up the variable cost in the business, right? Then you have your fixed cost there's the total given to you. Can you see? 795,900. Then you have your factory overhead cost and your administration cost. Those are the two costs that I said to you. We consider those costs to be our fixed cost, right? So we want total fixed cost and we want our variable cost per unit, and there is our selling price per unit. So we did not even have to calculate selling price per unit. Therefore the calculation was only worth 4 marks, right? But it can easily be up to 7 marks if there's more calculations involved for us. Know your formula. Like I said, if you see manufacturing, most likely you will see production. I've honestly not yet seen a paper where they didn't have break-even point, right? So let's do our calculation quickly. Let's go to our answer sheet. Okay, calculate break-even point. Our formula is fixed cost over selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. Okay, you like to say contribution per unit here, but it becomes difficult if I must say contribution per unit, because what do I mean with contribution per unit? Then you still have to know selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, right? So let's find our information. Our fixed cost is 795,900 over your selling price per unit, 18 rands and 85 cents. Minus 11 rands and 75 cents, right? Do that calculation for me quickly. Okay, and your answer would be, let's write it here, 112,000 on your calculator and 98.59, or you can round it off to 12,099. Be careful with this rounding off. Don't round off too much or even backwards rounding, right? Just leave the answer, I think, on your calculator. In the marking guide, they will make provision for rounding off. But if I say now this one is rounded off to 112,099, you would maybe want to round it off to 113,000, which will maybe be too much and not provided for in your memorandum, right? So be careful with the rounding. And in maths, they say if it's less than 5, then you round backwards, and if it's more than 5, you go up. Maths lit people will say check what it is, because they also have upwards rounding and downward rounding. We are accountants. Leave the thing the way it is on the calculator, right? Try and leave it as far as possible. Just cut off those extra figures that you are given and put it on a 9 maybe or something, right? But be very careful with the rounding off. Okay, because rounding off, if you round off too early, it can also give us a different figure, right? We don't want that. We need every single mark that we can get. Okay, next part of the question, that's in your first answer. Break-even point is in 112,098.59 or 112,099, right? Part 2 that normally goes with this question. Explain why Wally should be concerned about the profitability and sustainability of the business. Give 2 points with figures to support your answer. This one was asked a little bit differently, but in essence they want you to talk about the break-even point, right? If your break-even point, let's look at an example quickly, is 5,000 units and you're only making 6,000. Then the 1,000 units that you are making more than the break-even is your profit. If you are making 3,000, then the 2,000 is a loss that you're making in the business because you are not covering your cost. And the idea is to make more items than the break-even point. So you must remember that. If we're making less than the break-even, then we're making a loss in our business. If we're making more than the break-even, then we're making a profit. So the goal here is to make as many more items than more than the break-even. Get further away from your break-even as possible, right? Let's see what's happening. So your primary point when you discuss break-even must be comparing the number of units produced with the break-even point. calculate even the difference between the two so that you can say it's more, like I said, 1,000 more or 2,000 less than the break-even point, right? Let's find our number of units produced in this one. Okay. Every year they sell all the goods they produce. In 2019, they had 98,000 units. And the break-even was 78. Can you see it was good? It was 20,000 more than the break-even, right? But now let's look at what's happening in February 2020. We made our number of units produced and sold was 110,500. Yet our break-even is 112. So we did not even reach the break-even point. We're making a loss in this business. So what's the first point that you have to comment on? You compare your break-even point with the number of units produced. In this case, your answer will say, we produce the break-even point and state your break-even point. The break-even point is 112,098.59, or let's work with a rounded of what? 112,099. That's my break-even point. I've produced 110,500. I have not made my break-even point. I am making a loss in the business. And that will be 2 marks for you, right? So you state that you're making a loss, you state your break-even, you state your number of units produced, calculate the difference between the two. The difference between it can be 1,599. 1,599 items short of the break-even point. We are therefore making a loss. Should you be concerned about the profitability and sustainability of this business? Yes. You don't just want to cover your costs, you want to make a profit in your business, right? So you want to make more items than the break-even point, right? Another point that we can discuss, maybe a secondary point, is to compare with the previous year. Hence, I've given you the previous year. To say the previous year, we made 98,000, our break-even was 78,000. So our break-even increased in our number of units that we produced and sold increased, but it's less than the break-even point. So first you compare break-even to number of units produced, then you can compare your break-even with the previous year's break-even, even how well it went the previous year, whether we made break-even or not. Okay. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of our question on manufacturing. So remember what we said today. Read carefully, look at your dates. Remember, when you do factory overheads, it's only factory. And as you read your information, write it on your answer sheet. Don't read everything. Maybe in the time that you are reading, you read through all your information, read through the question on production or manufacturing. Once you start answering, you do information A is normally your opening and closing balances. Go and place it where it belongs. Already you're picking up marks. B, you take your information, put it where it belongs. C, take it, put it. So when I get to the end of the question, all I have to do is add up all my information, then I'm done with the question. So I don't do this up and down, looking for information. That way, I also don't miss any information, right? Write with a pencil if you have to. Make sure it's a good quality pencil, and erase if you see. Or park, like I always say, park your information. If this is information related to direct material and I don't need it right now, go and write it there next to direct material cost that you don't forget it. Thank you and good luck with your exam.